Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the IceRiver Al0 and why I decided to purchase a few more units. Okay, so we're going to talk about just the comparison of different prices. We're going to look at the potential future outlook and just kind of the strategy involved. Like, what is the mindset? What are we looking at? What's the perspective and what the strategies are, right? So we'll just have a nice little chat about it. So that sounds good, guys. Stay tuned. Let's get to this thing. So this guy has a lot of stuff going on, right? So gonna be releasing here fairly soon. The release window for batch 1 did get pushed back. Now the shipping date is August 31st to September 10th, which means what? Probably gonna start shipping September 10th. Maybe a little bit sooner, hopefully, but just take that into account. So strategy-wise, initially was kind of on the fence as to what to do. I'd initially ordered one right off the rip. As soon as it was announced, bought one. Kind of on the fence, ideally waiting for a mid-tier unit. After really considering things, looking at where the market is currently, decided it's just going to make more sense to get a few more of the Al0s, and that's going to be my current mining exposure for lithium for now. A big reason is that currently, just because of the way a lot of the other ASICs are going, it's very hard to mine and hodl with having a high electric bill. Okay, so the mindset here is that it's a good way to grow, getting decent exposure, and for these units, 400 watts, not that hard to pay out of pocket. Okay, realistically, there's going to be a lot of volatility, more so, in my opinion, more risk with the bigger units. Okay, so again, like the Al1, for example, very likely hash rate, yield, hash rate is going to go up, yield is going to go down. By what extent, we're not sure, other than we know it's going to happen. Okay, so if that happens, if the market continues staying sideways for a while, what's going to likely to happen? Those prices are going to go down, especially on the bigger units. Again, when we have those price reductions on the hardware, it is felt the hardest on those bigger units. Okay, so if we continue to chop, yields go down, very possible in a couple of months, those Al1s may have a pretty harsh price reduction. Same case even if there was a mid-tier IceRiver unit, potentially the same scenario there. And typically from what we've seen in the past, the Al0 tends to scale into even the more mid-tier units fairly well. There usually is a discount for getting those bigger units, so the price to terahash is slightly better. The advantage for me is the potential for overclocks here. So even if there is a 10-15% discount for buying the larger units, there's potential for a 20+% overclock with these smaller guys to kind of compensate for that difference, and without having to be forced to buy, again, a larger amount of units or a larger amount of hardware, at least in terms of price. Okay, so for me, risk reward is better with the Al0 in comparison, just because of that. Okay, so there's going to be different strategies involved depending on price action and how the hash rate gets hit. We'll talk about that here in a second. Let's look at prices. Okay, so this guy, 800 bucks. Your actual ship price is going to be, let's look at, I had them in cart already. If you order the Al0 and the PSU and shipping, price from IceRiver is $873. There are coupon codes from some of the creators, brings it down to I think like $850. So one price point to consider there. The problem ordering from here is that you're going to get hit with those tariffs if you're ordering multiple units. Okay. So even if you're not ordering multiple units, we're going to do a nice little shout out to the sponsor of today's video, and that's nhash.net, for having the better prices. Okay, so currently they're gonna have the best price out of the major stores shipped. Okay, so there will be an affiliate link in the description. It does help support the channel, as well as a coupon code. So this coupon code is exclusive to the Al0, and it's for our community. It is going to take $20 off of a single unit, bringing the price down to $829 shipped. Okay, so this includes the PSU. This price will be good until August 30th, although realistically, if you're interested in getting one of these things, it's to take advantage of getting in on that initial batch. Okay, so there is a potential for these things to sell out. You don't want to wait until the 29th and try to order and then get stuck in a later batch because you ordered so late. Okay, so it's totally up to you. But we're going to talk about what to expect here and the strategies involved here. But again, if you're interested, that is their price. Let's compare it to the competition, right? We saw IceRiver's price. Let's go to Miner Bros. Their price shipped is $9.19. So pretty good savings there. We will also compare it to CMC, which is another popular store. This is $9.83 shipped. So pretty good savings over there. And this is another store that people have been talking about. This is ASIC Plug. They have it at $9.25 shipped. So pretty good savings there as well. Okay. So if you are interested, out of the major stores, this is one of the best prices. Okay. So again, totally up to you. But if you want price, you know where to go. So let's talk about what to potentially expect here. Okay, we know we can go to these calculators and we'll see, oh, it's making $8 a day, was making X amount before. We know that by the time we get this unit, this is not going to be the case. Okay, so you have to factor that in. So think about that, number one. Number two, my biggest recommendation, focus on the yield. Okay, the play here with these smaller at-home units or any of these efficient units where it's something where it's only 100 watts is to pay that electric out of pocket and mine and hodl. Okay, so again, we'll talk about the different strategies here in a bit, but let's talk about the potential profitability of this thing by the time that you actually get it, because again, we know it's not going to be this. Okay, and like I said, focus on the yield because again, price can fluctuate. We can potentially moon in like 2-3 weeks and again, the profitability go up, but the yield is going to remain, or say on the vice versa, on the opposite side, we can also tank, right? But focus on that yield and what that yield will be worth potentially in the bull market in the future. Okay. So the biggest factor here though is going to be this freaking monster. The AL1 is going to dictate how hard this initial hash rate gets hit. Okay, 15.6 terahash, which is a monster over the 400 gigahash of the other unit. Okay, big ass difference. The big key thing though that has me hesitant, like again, even if I had 30K to blow, I would not go here at this price point. Reason being is that the AL0 scales into this thing perfectly. Okay, in terms of price, in terms of efficiency, it is pretty freaking close. So because of that, it does not make sense. So like in the past, you know, you had the efficiency difference with the Bitmain unit. Not the case here. You had a price advantage before with the bigger units for density. Also not really the case here. Okay, so for that reason, I personally don't think it's going to be a massive initial batch of these things. Because again, it just infinitely makes more sense to get some exposures through the AL0s and potentially wait for the bigger IceRiver unit if you're interested in getting one of the big units now, which for me personally, again, the strategy is going to be to wait for things to settle before I decide to get one of these things. Okay, so in terms of hash rate, like where we think it's going to go, let's do some ballpark numbers. Okay, so again, realistically, because of like what we just mentioned, I don't think it's going to be something where like 2,000 of these units are live initially. Okay, over time, of course, right? Especially for lithium pumps, definitely. But now we're focused on these initial batch, okay? So a realistic number could be what? Let's say we can throw in, because again, we don't know. It could be a couple hundred units. It could be a couple thousand units. My guess, we could throw a ballpark number at 500 units, okay? So we can just do a quick math. We could multiply 500 by the 15.6 terahash. That's going to give us a grand total of 7,800 terahash. Okay, and when we plug that into a calculator, again, it's just dividing by 1,000, 7.8 petahash. Okay, so that's an additional 7.8 petahash that we're going to have to add to the network. That's one thing to consider. In my opinion, because again, there's going to be 3 manufacturers here, Gold Shell, Bitmain, and IceRiver. The Gold Shell unit to me is already in effect. Okay, so we did have this recent increase from pretty much around the 2 petahash range up to 3. A lot of people have been speculating that, oh, that's the AL1 testing. In my opinion, it's actually people getting their AL box 2 after that initial price cut. Okay, a lot of people started getting it these past few days, and a lot of people are going to continue to get it these next few days. Okay. So to me, the gold shell is already kind of factored in. I don't think too many people are going to be purchasing it afterwards, just because again, at this point, it's now August 14th. The AL1 is going to be shipping here in a few weeks, and then the AL0, which is much better efficiency, is going to be shipping right soonly after. To me, if this was the initial price, this would have potentially been the better buy just because, again, it's available now. Currently, at this price, it just doesn't make sense for the difference. If it was just as efficient, then sure, the difference is it's not. So if you're only getting 1 unit, in reality, it's not that big of a deal. But if in like my case, we're getting 4 units, that efficiency difference does add up. And the fact that you can overclock with the AL0 potentially is another factor to consider. Okay, so for those reasons, I won't see too many more people jumping on these things. Okay, sure, some people will, people who are not as well informed, or with this Echo thing that's supposed to get announced tomorrow. Although realistically, I think it's going to be similar efficiency, just more chips. How many more chips? We don't know. Maybe it's liquid cooled, water cooled. We don't know, but I don't think it's going to be any more efficient than this guy. Okay. So we know that if we have about 500, it's going to add about another 8 petahash to the existing 3. So that brings us up to 11. And now let's speculate that there's going to be about 2,000 of the AL0s, right? To me, that's a realistic number. Could it be more? Could it be less? Sure, less. I don't think so. More, potentially, yes. But we're going to see how even 2,000 units isn't going to affect things a ton. So 2,000 units, and we're going to multiply that by what? The 400 gigahash that each unit is. Okay, so it brings us to a total of 800,000 gigahash. So if we put in 800,000 gigahash, which is 800 terahash or 0.8 petahash, not a big hit on the network. So again, even if it goes up to 2,500, 3,000, not the biggest hit. Okay, so again, if we're doing easy math, we're speculating that it's going to go up 4x, potentially, maybe less, maybe more. We could factor that in, that we're going to be at 12. Maybe our yield will be down to about a fourth of what it is currently. Okay, so again, focus on the yield. Okay, so if our yield goes from 5.7, we cut that down and brings it down to about 1.45. Okay, potentially 1.45 alpha a day, and at alpha's current price, that would bring us down to about $2.20 profit or revenue per day. Okay, which, I get it, does not sound very good at all. Okay, so 2 mindsets here. One is like mine, for example. These are tools to DCA. Okay, so I value it at what I think it's going to be worth potentially sometime in the bull market, which for me, not financial advice, is just my number. I have it at $10 sometime in 2025. Okay, is it probably going to be more than that? I personally think so, but again, when I'm doing these estimates based on profitability and such, and whether ASICs are worth or not, I try to be very conservative on the price. Okay, hopefully I am super lowballing it and it's way higher, but this is just how I try to look for the value in it, right? So like for me, for example, like yes, 1.45 ALF doesn't sound a lot, but if you're valuing it at $10 an ALF, $14, okay? So that's one strategy, one way to look at it, okay? Different strategies involved. So one is either to mine and hodl, right? Which is you're just stacking this thing, which to me is likely to be my actual scenario, especially if price action tends to stay like how it's been here, was just sideways or potentially even downwards for quite a while, right? Which realistically would be my preferred outcome, believe it or not. Reason being is that if price action and profitability aren't so good, what's going to happen? Not as many people are going to be buying these things. If Alephium moons in like 2 months and goes up to like $3, $4, or $5 again, what's going to happen? They're going to be selling these things like freaking hotcakes, right? So at that point, what do you really think is going to happen? The price is just, or the hash rate is going to continue to moon, okay? Which at that point, what's going to happen? Yield is going to go down. So realistically, again, as bearish as it sounds, I would prefer for things to be sideways for quite a while just to continue to stack for a while. Reason being here, this is where the strategy comes in. From what we've seen with IceRiver with these zeros is they typically, at least in the past, have came out in 6-month intervals. Going back to the KS0, KS0 Pro, and the Ultra, it was almost exactly 6 months in between each model. So theoretically, if there were to be a more efficient unit, more efficient chips, we can theorize that maybe potentially as soon as 6 months we can have another model. Will that happen, or are these the higher end chips that they're going to be? Hard to really say because they are on par with the Bitmain unit. That's where things get a little bit tricky, but again, I would plan for a worst case scenario and say that potentially a newer, more efficient model, maybe being twice as efficient, comes out in 6 months. Okay, so the other potential strategy here is to flip it potentially in 4 months. So for me, where are we going to be at in 4 months? We're going to be in December, potentially right when things are getting good. I think it is fairly possible that we go back to the bear market highs somewhere between now and the next 4 months. Will it happen? Maybe, maybe not. If it doesn't happen, then it's definitely going to be just DCA devices that are plugged in like that thing and just all the way through the rest of this bear market and all the way through the bull market. Because the other thing to know historically, the initial KS0s, which that's not an initial KS0, but in those initial KS0s are just now getting to the point where they're unprofitable. After all these freaking units, after the hash rate going up 800x, it took a year for that to happen. Okay, so there would be very good DCA devices because again, at 400 watts, it's very easy to mine and hodl at that point. Okay, especially when so many other things are not profitable. That way, just continue to add. The other scenario is if things do pump, let's say we're now in December, we're at 4 months, potentially 2 months before the new model potentially maybe comes out, maybe it doesn't happen. If prices are high, they go up to 3, 4, potentially even higher, good potential to flip some of those units. Okay, so I did end up getting up to a total of 4 units. The potential strategy there would be to flip maybe 2 of them, maybe all of them, depending on how much it pumps. But potentially 2 of them, and if I were to get the price that I paid for them initially, which again, if the price pumps at that point, I think it's fairly doable, sell 2 of them and just mine and hodl the other 2. Or if prices go really crazy, then I'll probably just dump all 4 of them. Okay, so that's just one of the strategies there. Maybe I'll flip it, maybe I won't. Ideally, what I would realistically just want to do is just freaking stack coins, right? Use it as a DCA device just to go all the way through, because Alephium is a coin I want to hold all the way until the bull market. Okay, so those are different things to consider, different things to look at. Now, as far as like pricing the Alephium, like, oh, do you think it's going to actually be worth that amount? I personally think so. If we go and look at historical snapshots, this is a historical snapshot from November 2021 on CoinMarketCap. And the reason I'm saying the $10 price point is just because it seems very feasible, right? Alephium is a still fairly small market cap coin. It's ranked number 300. Current market cap is at 130 million. Okay, I think it's fairly feasible for this thing to potentially crack the top 100. And from the previous bull market, to crack the top 100, you needed to have about $1 billion market cap. Okay, I think that's very feasible. I think it's likely that it will exceed that, just because, again, typically the expectation for the total market cap to increase, the expectation is anywhere from like 2 to 4x, right? So it's potentially that although it was $1 billion last market cycle, it may be $2 billion to crack the top 100. So maybe it doesn't even crack the top 100, but I think realistically $1 billion market cap, the potential is pretty easily there in my opinion. Okay, so when we look at what the price could be, a good website to like mess around with market caps and circulating supply is the coinperspective.com. This one, what it also allows you to do is just do a straight comparison to another coin, and it's just comparing market caps, right? That's all it's kind of doing. So an easy one to put in is you could put Alephium here, and you could put what you think the price would be at, and it'll tell you the market cap where it would be at and such. So if our target price, this is based off of the current circulating supply, realistically you would have to add the other coins in circulation, which it does have a field to do that here if you want to be more accurate. But based off of the current circulating supply, if it were to reach $10, it would be 855 million. So that wouldn't even bring us to the Billy. It would be about $12, but again, you have to account for inflation here also, right? So you can mess around with it more here, but I think that's very doable. I think it's even potential that we hit well beyond that, right? Even if we hit $20, that would be 1.7. So account for inflation, maybe 2.5 billion. I think it's somewhat possible here, right? So again, even though the one Alephium that you would potentially earn doesn't sound too appealing, if Alephium appreciates to the point where we think it will, something to consider there, okay? And if you're able to time it just right, and after 4 months, you were able to get a good amount of yield during that time, and you're able to sell those units for what you paid for them, you're essentially getting that yield for like free, essentially, because again, the 100 watts that you're paying out of pocket is fairly negligible. Again, if it's a unit that's like 2,000, 3,000 watts, it's kind of hefty, something definitely more to consider. But what we're kind of banking on is just getting that early yield, okay? Because you got to remember also with a lot of coins in general, the current yield in the bear market, or the profitability, I should say, doesn't seem so great until a lot of time has passed and you look back and you're like, man, it was making X amount during that time, right? Even things as recently as like when I got my KS3M, for example, got it back in December, and I was looking at like how much some of the early yields were, and it was freaking like there were days where it was like 700 something Caspa a day, right? Which is insane to think about, just because again how much it's appreciated. Back then it was pretty good, but wasn't necessarily the greatest, and it's just hard to imagine what it's going to be worth, because again I try to look at it from what it's going to be. Okay, so like for me, my price target with Caspa is a very conservative 50 cents. So even just easy math, 700 Caspa was like I made 350 bucks that day. Okay, and that's kind of the mine and hold thing. But for me, like I only try to do it with coins that I believe in, that I think long-term wise will do well. Because obviously you can try to do that with like a freaking a coin that's in the top 1,000. Oh, if it reaches this, it's like, are you that confident it's going to do that, right? Hopefully it does, right? And that's how people do get those 100Xs and such, but you kind of have to factor in what that could be worth, right? So like even like at 700 Caspa at today's price, with the tanking right now, it'd be 116 bucks. But again, realistically, I don't even care what's worth now, because it's going to be selling in the bull market, which is that amount. So it's kind of the same mindset here with the lithium also, okay? So it's different strategies depending on what you're doing. What I recommend necessarily buying for them, it's up to you. That's just going to be my exposure amount that I'm comfortable with, and that's going to be it for now. So again, I was kind of waiting for a mid-tier unit, but I decided to go this route. Will I get a mid-tier unit? Probably not at this point. I would probably feel better waiting for everything to happen and seeing what the prices on these bigger units ends up being after a couple of months, right? After that initial hash rate gets hit, prices go down, and we kind of reevaluate. Okay, but at this point, by purchasing these smaller units, able to get some exposure, maybe the hash rate doesn't go up and yield is better initially. Another thing to factor in is because the network will be relatively low in comparison to what it's going to be in like 12 months, solo mining could be a thing here as well. Just like we saw initially with like the KS0s, it was pretty beneficial to solo mine early on. There is potential for that here also, right? So chances are, at least with one of them, I may mess around and solo mine and see what ends up being more worthwhile. Okay, so again, different strategies here, different things to consider. For me though, it's one that I believe in long term, so for me it's a no-brainer to buy an ASIC for it, because again, at the end of the day, it's a task write-off and it's a risk that to me is worth taking. Again, it's up to you whether you want to get more of these units. But again, for just one unit, if it's a project you believe in, again, if you're iffy on a lithium, you're like, I don't know what it's going to do, then kind of a hard one, right? Realistically, I would wait for everything to go down and see what happens. But for me, it is one that I'm definitely holding long term. As far as my portfolio goes, it's my 4th biggest bag, right? So high confidence play for me. I think it's going to do fairly well. Hopefully it goes and exceeds my $10 price point by quite a bit, which is very possible, right? Let me know in the comments, guys. What do you guys think? Are you guys super bullish on a lithium? Are you kind of so-so? Did you guys order one of these things? Are you kind of interested? Let me know in the comments, guys. What do you guys think? Let me know your predictions. How many of these AL1s do you think will go live by, let's say, mid-September? Where do you think we're going to be at? Let me know in the comments, guys. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching, and we are out.